All right, we are back, episode 9. This is probably this is going to be my most favourite podcast so far because it's a topic that interests me a lot. So today we've got a very special guest, but we're going to cover some of the essential information that you need to gain muscle, how to gain muscle, more from a training perspective today than a nutrition perspective. I think we'll cover that in another episode, but who better to join us than one of Australia's best strength and conditioning coaches? We've got David Young from the New South Wales Institute of Sport, or NSWIS, but you've also been at the English Institute of Sport.
Yeah, that's great.
You worked on the Sports Council in Wales, and you're working with some of Australia's best athletes, Olympic athletes. Pretty impressive resume.
Yeah.
What made you get into strength and conditioning as a coach?
I guess from a relatively early age, I had an interest in both sport and strength training.
Yeah.
And I guess as I went through uni and started sort of developing knowledge, I decided this is an area I wanted to go into. And I was fortunate to get some good breaks along the way early in my career. And here I am now, sort of strength and conditioning coach for 16 years, full-time role, and worked across 3 different organisations and lots of different sports.
How long have you been at NSWIS for?
Almost 11 years. It'll be 11 years beginning of July, yeah.
So you would have worked with some high-profile Australian athletes, for sure.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
And so are you concentrating on any particular sport at the moment, or are you working across a broad range down there at NSWIS?
So this Olympic cycle, since late 2016, I've been working at the National Training Centre for the Australian women's rowing team out in Penrith. So we've got we had to change a model with rowing in Australia where we went to a centralised system. So the men are based in Canberra, the women are based in Penrith, and I've been working with them since. So we've got 25 girls training day in, day out there.
Geez, that sounds like fun. Rowers are some of the best athletes on the planet. Their cardiovascular and their strength, their strength and conditioning is, I would put it up there with any other sport in the world as far as elite level strength and conditioning.
Yeah, and I think they're some of the hardest working athletes, and like huge volumes of training. Like the girls do 16 sessions a week on a heavy week, and that's pretty hard work.
Australia does pretty well in the rowing as well. So
have done over the years for sure.
Yeah. Well, you do have an impressive resume. Today's going to be sort of not focused on any sport in particular, but more around sort of gaining muscle. So that might be for your chosen sport. You might just be a footy player on the weekend, a young guy that needs to put on a bit of muscle mass to play in a certain position, or you could just be a casual at the gym and you want to put on a bit of muscle to attract the ladies or the men or whatever it is, whatever you're into.
And we always talk about the 3 elements when it comes to sports. Your physical conditioning and things like that, and then your technique, and then your mental game. So we've actually touched on technique and mentality recently. So let's dive into the physical stuff today.
Yeah. Look, for as far as training for muscle gain, it is very different than training for strength and also training for power or explosivity. Mm-hmm. Explosivity? Is that a word? Did I say that right?
It's a word now.
It's a word now. So, muscle gain, does strength always mean muscle gain? And does muscle gain always mean that you're stronger?
Oh, it's a good, interesting question. A good question. Not necessarily, I think is the answer. So what we do know is that we know your sort of physiological cross-sectional area of a muscle is related to your ability to produce force. So there is a relationship there, but it's kind of only one half of the sort of scenario. We have nervous system factors that can allow us to recruit more motor units and exert more force. So sure, having more muscle should be stronger, but we need to develop the nervous system as well. And that's what we tend to do with our lower rep stuff when we do maximal strength training or power training when we're moving things with speed. And with hypertrophy training, we've got a specific aim to sort of try just gain mass. And that means we just train slightly differently. Yeah.
So it's not specifically about gaining more muscle. Sometimes it's more about your brain being better connected to the muscle.
That's right. So you've got your central drive, or you've got your rate coding down the nerve, or the ability to sort of fire those motor units in the muscle to maybe take away some of the inhibition that you might have in opposite muscles that are sort of looking after you and making sure you don't get injured. Yeah. So there's quite a few factors in there with regards the nervous system as well.
In regards to the nervous system, is that a genetic thing, or is that something you can actually coach and train or work on yourself? Like, is there a way to teach an athlete that neuromuscular connection.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's something that's definitely a trainable factor. So that's just by, I mean, there's 3 ways really to drive that. One, you've got to lift a heavy load. One would be to lift a moderate load, but with speed and intent to move it fast. And the third one, which we probably will touch on today with the hypertrophy training, is just by taking by working to failure. So you're recruiting all of your muscle fibers. So
Okay.
be 3 ways, yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of guys when they jump into the gym, that's their default mode, just train to failure. But with a well structured strength and conditioning program, sometimes you got to be a bit more wise about managing your loads and
That's right.
and things like that.
And you see it in the gym as well. There's a lot of guys go in there and sort of they're just trying to lift as heavy as possible without actually trying to squeeze the muscle group or focus on the muscle group that you're actually training and recruit the correct muscle fibers. So over time, it can sort of be wearing on joints and all that sort of thing and can lead to injuries. So yeah, that mind-muscle connection that you brought up is definitely super important aspect of hypertrophy or muscle building training.
Yeah.
What about in powerlifting, Dhiren? Do you is that mind-muscle connection as important?
It's super important,
Yep.
If you look at some of the strongest powerlifters in the world, they don't necessarily look like some of the strongest guys in the world, But how they're so strong is because they have this better connected, their brain is better connected to the muscle through this neuromuscular adaptations.
It's an interesting point that you bring up as well, because I've been following lately a guy probably everyone in the fitness community knows is Lane Norton. He was sort of an ex-bodybuilder and did really well, and then crossed over to powerlifting, and you can actually see he's obviously become a hell of a lot stronger since he's started powerlifting, but he's actually, like his muscularity in his legs and everything he doesn't carry as much muscle as what he used to when he was bodybuilding. So although he's a lot stronger and more powerful, he's nowhere near as muscular as what he was.
Yeah, and
so it's a different style of training for a different purpose.
And you do see some of these bodybuilder guys that really don't have this, the strength that you might think that they have. And it's, the age-old question, is it better to be stronger than you look, or is it better to look stronger than you are?
Yeah, well, I guess it depends on the reason why you're doing it.
Yeah.
But I think most guys that want to get big, they also want to be strong as well.
Yeah.
So I think strength is definitely part of it.
And
So
I think certainly in a sport, if we talk in a sporting context, like just having mass without like being able to produce force with it and express that force is probably not that useful most of the time.
No.
And maybe on a front rower or something like that where you just mass is momentum, but I think most of the time you want to be able to have functional strength.
Functional mass.
Yeah.
So probably age-old question, and probably a question that a lot of people ask when they're first getting into training, type of training program. So you see different types of training program, like probably the most common when you first get into training is I get in there and I train my whole body, do a full body workout. And I mean, I did that. When I first started training, I was doing full body workouts like 5-6 days a week, like an idiot would when you're first training. And then you've got your sort of your split routines where you might just focus on one or two body parts. And then you've got sort of like push-pull routines. Mm-hmm. Is there any preference that you have or you recommend for someone looking to gain muscle?
I think it depends how much time they can dedicate to training, in my opinion. So I think if someone's only really able to lift 3 times a week and say it's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday or Monday, Thursday, Saturday or something like that, for me the preference would still probably be to do 3 whole body workouts.
Yep.
You probably wanting to train each body part 2 to 3 times a week, which I know is against a little bit of bodybuilding principles in historically where people might train only one part. But then as your number of days go up, probably then start splitting it up a little bit. So I think if you're doing 2 successive days, it's probably best to split it, and whether that's doing an upper lower body or, like you said, a push pull or even a strength speed variation way of mixing up there. So I've got at the moment with the athletes I work with, most of them lift 3 times a week, but we've got a group of about half a dozen girls who lift 4 times a week. So what we do with them, we do a lower body Monday, an upper body Tuesday, and then full body Thursday and Saturday. So we still train each body part 3 times a week, but that just allows us to get a bit more volume into their training by doing that. So,
and I guess it depends on your sport as well. You're probably working around skill training, cardiovascular training, plus a game or competing on the weekend. Or you're just the guy in the gym that's able just to train 4 or 5 days a week without any game or competing on the weekend. So it will differ.
Yeah.
But as far as like the frequency of training, like if you do have all the time in the world and you don't compete in any sport, I mean, I started doing like 6 days a week and I soon realized that was far too much for me. Is there a sort of a general guideline or recommendation for how many times you can lift in a week? Obviously, we need to think about nervous system overload.
Right. I think you just have to be smart the way you sort of what do you call
program it?
Yeah, you program it. So you could lift twice a day.
Yep.
You know, and lots of people you lift in the morning or before work and after work and targeting different muscle groups. I mean, I certainly don't think you can go 6 days a week and then train to failure in every set you do because you'll cook yourself pretty quick if you do that. But I think just looking at what you've got in your schedule, what other training you've got, how much time you've got. So, I mean, one of the key thing that relates to between gains to the training is volume. So obviously the more sessions you do, it's a way of building volume, but by spreading it out, you can also give some recovery. So I would say 3 to 5 days a week is probably sensible, but I'm sure bodybuilders are lifting more than that for sure. So
probably 5, 6 days a week, bodybuilders splitting up the muscle group, so they're only working one muscle group once a week.
Well, there's many bodybuilders do it in many different ways as well. Right, so I think it comes back to the principles. A lot of them focus on the compound trainings where you're trying to recruit as many muscles as possible, and then kind of then get onto the isolation stuff closer to trying to get these specific muscle groups.
Yeah, the isolation stuff's a lot less stressful on your system as a whole. So like that stuff, that's one of the reasons they do break it up. But I'm still a believer certainly for athletes, but for most populations, the compound exercises should still form the key part of your program, with your isolation sort of single joint movements being sort of the supplementary to that. So.
And also that that neuromuscular connection you talked on. With a compound lift, there's so many elements that come into play. Compare a squat to a bicep curl. Yeah. All this coordination and balance and things like that come into play a bit more.
Sure.
So we've sort of figured out how many times a week. Does this differ like as we age? Like me being 75 years old, should I still be training 4 or 5 times a week?
I mean,
or are we looking to sort of back it off and listen to our bodies a bit more, or can we still go hard up until a certain age? Like,
well, I think you just see how you cope. Really, I don't know whether, like for me, like I'm in my 40s now, and my ability to recover between sessions has definitely gone down, and I couldn't. Like even me doing 3 whole body sessions a week, it's actually a challenge, and I tend to split 1, 2, and then do 1 whole body. But I wouldn't say that you get to a certain age and you've got to do that. You have to see how how you're dealing with it. Some people maybe cope better.
Everybody's
as they get older.
so different.
And it might just be probably the other thing is just gradually as you get older, you might need to reduce the volume a little bit, and like you said, you probably some of your joints and things are wearing out a little bit, so you might have to adapt your sort of exercise selection. But there's always a way to train. I think like certainly working with athletes who get injured, you always find a way to train them when they're sort of it's got certain restrictions on their training.
So we're speaking about volume. Break down what volume means to someone that might be listening that has no idea. What are we talking about when we say volume?
So volume would be sort of your reps times your set. So it's actually really just the number of reps you do within a session.
Yep.
So if you did 4 sets of 10 back squat, your volume would be 40 repetitions. Yeah.
So on volume, there's probably a few questions I have. Let's probably start with the most common question, which is sets and reps per exercise, and then how many exercises per workout. So for muscle building, it's going to be very different for strength and power, obviously, but for muscle building.
So if we looked at a standard sort of strength text or resistance training text, the numbers that you always see are 6 to 12 reps.
Right.
And that's for very good reasons, because there's 3 main things we're trying to develop when we train for hypertrophy. One is muscular tension. We want enough tension to create sort of an adaptation. One is metabolic stress. So we want to create stress on the system. And the third one is muscle damage. But muscle damage probably to a large extent is caused by the other 2. So if we talk about mechanical tension, so that would be essentially the load that's on the bar. So as we discussed a little bit earlier, if we tend to use lower reps for maximal strength work. But whilst that, depending on the individual and how well trained they are, like you might still get some muscle gain with doing, say, 3 or 4 reps, especially with anabolic individuals. I remember working with some sprinters in the past, and they'd blow out pretty quick.
Yeah.
But not everyone's like that. And basically, that sort of load on its own might not be enough to create muscle growth, and that's where we talk about the metabolic stress. Now, the
pump.
Yeah, the pump, exactly, or the burn, as people like to talk about. So, but we could go to the park and run a 400 meters or do some repeat sprints. That's going to give us a pretty
your legs
amount
will
of
be
metabolic
burning.
stress, but we're not going to get muscle mass from that. Yeah. So that on its own, and we there's some research coming out now which has sort of been a bit different to what everyone thinks, but you can, as long as you go to failure, you can actually lift as low as 30% of 1 rep max and still get gains. But do we really want to do that many reps? So the reason why that 6 to 12 is used, and it makes a lot of sense, is because you get that nice balance between the load and the metabolic stress, where by doing those 6 to 12 reps is where you start to get your burn and stuff like that. So it's the combination of those two things. Now that is also why different sort of strategies and advanced strategies, where maybe using eccentric repetitions or lowering under load in a slower manner, you might be able to do that for 5 reps. Yeah. But the time under tension is
so
high.
Much higher.
It's higher, so it's going to give you a stimulus stress. And it's the same reason why things like drop sets work and different variations. So as a textbook answer, 6 to 12 reps, but really what we're trying to do is make sure we've got enough load and we're providing some metabolic stress in the process.
And talking about load, I guess, you mentioned that volume is the key principle to build muscle, but sometimes sometimes that has to come at the expense of intensity. And so, by intensity, we mean how much weight you're lifting. It's very hard to lift at your maximal a lot, right? So, sometimes throughout a training program, you'll transition from a high volume to, something like a high intensity with a lower volume, depending on your sport.
And do you recommend that for sort of a periodization sort of thing? So maybe a beginner starting out might work in that sort of 10 to 12 rep range with a lighter weight, and over time, as they're more comfortable with the exercise, sort of increase the weight and lower the rep range till they're eventually working 6 to 8 reps.
Yeah, I think that's a sensible strategy. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things, for a beginner, like, they should really adapt to anything. So I'd keep it pretty simple for them. And then as they sort of progress and develop, and then you've got to start adding some different stimuli to make sure they're adapting. So that might be manipulating reps and sets and load. It might be manipulating exercises, in time maybe using some advanced strategies. So.
Yeah.
And we've previously talked about progressive overload on this podcast. And, I guess all of these come into the picture of progressive overload. You can overload with more reps, with more weights, with more sets.
More there's frequency. A million different things you can do to create overload. Yeah. Another popular question that comes up, and it's probably a question that people ask me a lot, is how many exercises per workout? So say you, and how long should that workout be? They're probably the two questions I get the most.
Yeah. So the length of workout, I try to keep. My athletes will laugh at this, but I try to keep their session under an hour with regards to the main content of the session. Now we have probably a 15-minute warm-up on top of that, where they're trying to switch on some muscles, do a bit of mobility work and stuff. So I think an hour's a good length. I know some hormonal research suggests that we shouldn't really be going much more than that, because it dies off. That's one of the things with research is so conflicting. And because, like you made a comment earlier, it's hard to. How do you do research on all these different factors? Manipulate exercise or load or reps and sets and volume, or it's so hard.
It's so hard. And even when you're talking about things like strength, I know we talk about building muscle, but there's so many factors that come in. Even your mood can affect your strength, and your music that's on can affect your mood. So yeah.
But coming back to the exercises, that's a really interesting question. One really popular type of training with Olympic lifters over the years is something called German volume training, which you've probably heard of. Right?
10 by 10.
Yeah, 10 by 10. And with normally only one exercise, normally a big fundamental lift like a squat, 10 sets, 10 reps, 1 minute between sets. Start pretty low load at only 60% 1 rep max. That will be pretty easy for them for the first 4 or 5 sets, and then it's pretty brutal by the end. And if you did that kind of training, you're probably only doing a couple of extra supplementary exercises on top of that, and you certainly wouldn't do 10 by 10 on those.
So it's not so much the number of exercises, it's more the number of sort of sets or volume.
I think so. So a bodybuilder would probably take a slightly different approach now. That they would probably do more exercises and target the muscles in different planes and different directions, and spread those 10 to say 15 sets across different exercises. So you might say for the chest, you might do a bench press for 4 sets of 10 or whatever, and then you might do some flyers, and you might do some incline, and then you might do some tricep work to finish. So it's a bit of a fuzzy answer, I think, but what I'm trying to get across is that you can use different methods, but it's the overall number of sets that's probably the important thing, and the overall number of reps across the session.
So we're looking at sort of 10 sets roughly per body part or per...
Yeah, I'd 10 to 15, I'd say, maybe a little bit more. I'm sure some bodybuilders doing once a week would do more than that. I think my preference would still be to train each body part twice. So it'd probably be, 10 to 15.
So when you say train each body part twice, I mean, that's recently come to light as more effective, but it's very hard for someone like myself who's training each body part once a week, and I'm training 4 days a week. It's hard to think, how am I going to reschedule this and retrain myself to train like that? Why are you recommending hitting each body part twice a week?
Yeah, well, that's one of the balances we've got. We've got all this anecdotal evidence from bodybuilders over the years where it's worked for them, so why change? And then we've got the other side of the thing with research, and we've spoken about the issues with research because it's just so hard to get well-trained subjects. How are you going to do your study design and just small manipulations? But I think most of the evidence suggests twice a week, at least twice a week. So I would, and my gut feel is that that's still a preferential way of training. So I know, I'm sure there'd be bodybuilders listening who would disagree with what I'm saying there, but if you listen to my opinion, I'd be saying the same for a specific muscle group at least twice a week, whether that's spreading across doing 3 whole body sessions or the split session or however you want to do it.
I think I'll listen to your opinion.
So I guess the answer to how many reps there's no blanket answer, right? It's about understanding the foundation principle of getting this volume in, and I guess twice a week is that good balance of volume and sufficient recovery. So that's the sweet spot.
Another thing I wanted to ask you, so from a personal perspective, and these are probably all personal questions today, but I used to do a 15-minute warm-up, and then I'd launch straight into my heaviest compound exercise. So say I'm doing leg day. I used to sort of do a decent leg warm-up, and then I'd jump straight into squats, and I'm trying to lift maximal amount, sort of pyramiding up and potentially down, depending on sort of what I'm doing. But more, now what I found over the years is it took a large toll on joints. And although I thought I was warmed up, I wasn't warmed up enough for those big heavy compound exercises. So I've now shifted those big heavy compound exercises to a little bit later in my workout routine. It's a bit of a hit to the ego because you're obviously not lifting as heavy. But I'm finding my ability to perform the exercise, I'm getting deeper into my squats, my technique's better, I feel more warmed up, I feel less prone to injury. Does order of exercise matter?
Well, I think first of all, what you got to do is find what works for you. Like you've got some real strong rationale with why you've changed your order there. So I would have no issues with that. But what you were saying to begin with, traditionally you'd start with your big compound movements. Like if you were going to have some explosive exercise in your program, you'd probably have those first. And then you'd have your big main key foundational exercises. So that would be your back squat or a deadlift, or if you're upper body, it'd probably be a pull-up or a bench press or something like that. And then you would sort of progress to your less key exercises, your supplementary exercises. But I guess you could, in your situation, you could look at doing maybe the warm-up wasn't sufficient, as you mentioned. Maybe you need to do a couple of light warm-up squat sets before you move into your big sets. And sometimes you only have to do, like you might be doing 8 squats, but in your warm-up sets you might only need to do 2 or 3 reps just to move through the range and get it moving with maybe 40%, 50% of the load you're going to use and progress it there. So I would still recommend your previous sort of strategy, but I mean, people have got to find what works right for them as well. So you get sort of strong rationale for why you change that. So.
And I guess the logic behind that is, traditionally I guess is, you're trying to get the most bang for your buck out of your workout, and these bigger compound and explosive movements tend to use a lot more energy. Sometimes for a lot of people it's harder to do these at the end of a workout when you don't have this energy. Obviously you're a bit different because I guess maybe it's taking longer for you to warm up to these.
I'm just old, mate.
Maybe.
It never used to be an issue, but
Yeah.
in the last few years it is.
Yeah.
I guess one thing it's worth talking about though is that an advanced training method for hypertrophy would be to pre-fatigue certain pre-exhaustion.
Mm.
So you might do, say, a set of step ups or leg extensions or whatever you might do before you're doing your squats. And that's been, that's a bit more of an anecdotal thing that's been working for people over the years. There's not really a great deal of research to support it, but not saying it doesn't work either. But that would be a way to try and recruit more motor units and get more muscle fibres recruited by fatiguing before you do the set. So again, there's the problem with strength training, There's
more than one part to the top of the mountain. Yeah.
My first mentor always used to, and I'd never heard the term at the time. He's a Kiwi fella. He always said, "There's many ways to skin a cat." Obviously, but it's true. With strength training, there's you've got to have strong foundational principles behind your programming.
Yeah.
But you can still apply those in many different ways.
But I think don't be too tied to any one thought pattern either. What you think works might not be the ideal thing for you. Try everything and see what works at the end of the day. Listen to everyone, obviously experts like yourself, take in that sort of knowledge and just develop something that works for you.
And like we mentioned earlier, as you become a more advanced trainer, you've done more, you need to give yourself some different stimuli to keep improving. If you keep, when you're a beginner, you can keep pretty much training a very simple, you could do 3x10 and improve for probably 3 or 4 months or just manipulate things slightly. But as you're more advanced and you've got 5, 10, 15 years training under your belt, you can't just keep doing the same thing and expect to get improvement.
So what sort of things can you do? Because you get to a point where you you hit a bit of if you're a natural athlete like myself and Dhiren, you hit a bit of a plateau and then you can fall into a bit of a trap of just going through the motions. You can employ drop sets and things like that, supersets and stuff like that. But after a while, I believe you can hit a natural sort of strength and size plateau for your genetics. Is
potentially
that
true? But
is that the case, or am I wrong there?
Well, you do have a genetic potential that is a limiter. So whether you're actually there or not, I don't know how you're ever going to actually know that.
Yeah.
So, I would, if I was a bodybuilder or looking at mass, and I'd do most of my training around that 6 to 12 repetition range, I would for sure come down to some max strength work at some point, try and push your max strength numbers up, then go back out to high volume, and you should be able to actually lift. If your lower numbers go up, you should be able to hold more weight for more reps as well. There's so many different ways to play around with it.
So even if you are training for muscle gain, you are still recommending
I would definitely at times
incorporate.
That would be part of your training variation and manipulation.
So how long should a sort of a muscle building program last? We're talking periodization here. First goal is to build muscle, 10 to 12 rep range. How long should I do that program for with all the same exercises?
How long is a piece of string?
I know, I'm trying to ask basic sort of introductory sort of questions that went through my head when I first got into training. It's how long should I be doing this same routine for before I change it up?
I think the simple answer to that is you do that until you stop improving. So
until you hit that.
I think one fault I had early in my career that you write a 4-week block or a 5-week block, and then you feel like your next training block has to be different to that. But if people are still improving towards your end goals, then you shouldn't be changing it. Just stick with it and ride it out for a bit longer. And so, once you stop improving, maybe you do 3 lots of, say, 10 with a beginner, and then after 6 weeks, the numbers aren't going up, maybe not going in match. Maybe you just add an extra set, and that could be enough. And you might do that in half your exercises, and then you might add it to the other half, and then you could add another set for your main exercises. And then maybe you just manipulate your reps a little bit, bring it down or go up, or you add a drop set in, or you do some slow eccentrics.
I guess
lots of ways. There's so many ways, and I guess that's part of what we're trying to do today. We're just trying to open people's eyes to some options that they have available to them. Yeah.
So I guess it comes back to those 3 principles. If you remember, about the mechanical tension, the volume and things like that, the metabolic stress, and the muscle damage. If you can incorporate those 3 principles, then understanding this will allow you to manipulate your own training and experiment a bit more, because a lot of it comes back to self-experimentation. What works for you might not work for me. So, but understanding the key concepts, the key principles, can kind of apply to everything and kind of make you understand why you're doing different things and maybe make you experiment more wisely.
So we talk about muscle damage. Another common question I get is, should I be training if I'm training a body part if it's still sore? And especially sort of training maybe twice a week.
Yeah.
If I've hit the bench fairly hard early on in the week, I've got a sore chest. Oh, guess what? That day is now rolled around where I need to train chest again. It's still a bit sore. Should I be training it?
I think you still can. I think you might just have to
warm up probably.
Yeah, warm up. Your loads might be lower, or you might have to. I mean, I think one thing that when you're sore, the worst thing you can do is sit around doing nothing. I found like you got to get moving, and like because basically you just got a build up of sort of inflammation in the muscle, and you've got sort of muscle damage, and you got all your body's trying to fix that up, and we're trying to hopefully get some protein synthesis, which is going to be what drives again your muscle mass. So we need to sort of move that liquid away from the area and the inflammation away, and the best way to do that is move. So I wouldn't have a major issue with people lifting on soreness.
Yep.
But you just have to be sensible, and like your range might be reduced, and and the load might be a little bit less, but I still think you can do it. And once you become accustomed to it to a certain extent, the amount of soreness you get from session to session should be reduced. It's just that first hit, maybe with a new exercise, or if you haven't trained for a couple of weeks.
Gym's reopening up.
Yeah, I'm sure there's lots of people sore at the moment.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question. There's going to be a lot of sore people out there.
I just love the feeling of soreness, like it feels like, I feel like odd if I'm not sore in any muscles at any time.
And it's probably a question that's come up before. I think one of the listener questions, if you get to the end of a work, or like the next day or the day after, if you're not sore, does it mean, like I know the answer to this, but does it mean that exercise just did nothing? Like should people be aiming for soreness out of every workout?
Not necessarily. No, I don't think so. Yeah.
And look, when it gets to the point where you do hit these plateaus, or you might be feeling a bit run down, do you ever recommend like a deload week, or do you recommend a week off here and there? And how often should we be taking time off?
Oh, for sure. And that's a good question, because I think that would be your standard gym user probably wouldn't really consider that. But yeah, certainly within our programs, we'd have a deload sort of strength week every probably 4 to 5 weeks, depending on how we write the training block and how their sort of their sport training and their technical training and their other training, sort of their endurance work is written. But and it doesn't necessarily mean having a whole week off, but you might just drop a set or drop a couple of sets out of your key exercises, just give your body a little bit of time to regenerate, and then you can build back into it again. So
I think a lot of people are scared. Like the young guys, like they think more is better always. So if they think, I'm going to take a week off, I'm going to shrink. Yeah. Is that the case?
No. So sometimes you just need to sort of taper it off and bring it back a little bit to be able to get that next gain. So actually that's another sort of technique we probably didn't talk about with people who are plateauing. Maybe you just need to sort of back off for a couple of weeks and then go again. Maybe especially people who are, maybe some people always train to failure. That's not a great idea all the time. So maybe that's the case. You just manipulate that. Or
sometimes you got to train smarter, not train harder.
I think you learn that as you get older and with experience as well. I know every set, I was training to failure, and now it's very rare I'll train to actual failure in a set. Yeah. It's always shy, and that's obviously because I've introduced jiu-jitsu 4 or 5 times a week, plus my weight training 4 times a week on top of that. If I was going to failure every session, I'd be a mess. Yeah,
and there's actually like a few measures that strength and conditioning coaches have started implementing now, like RPE, rate of perceived exertion. How tired is the set making you, and even reps in reserve. So like do a set of bicep curls with 1 or 2 reps in reserve, and it's kind of something that's easy to measure while you're in the gym.
Yeah, that's a good question. I had this is questions from a friend. They love their lifting wraps and their knee wraps, and sometimes I walk in, looks like they're a mummy in the gym. They've got that many wraps all over the body. Do you work with like lifting wraps or knee wraps and things like that? Do you recommend that sort of lifting equipment?
With my athletes, we don't. Yep. They use straps for deadlifting and stuff like that, but we don't tend to use wraps much. I wouldn't say, that's obviously a standard piece of equipment for a powerlifter when they're going to maximal, like they're trying to do their 1 rep max or whatever in competition. And I actually don't, with my athlete group, we don't use belts either, or try and avoid it. If they do use belts, it would be like we'd use they'd say, for instance, for squatting or deadlifting, they'd do the majority of their sets, and then we just introduce a belt if we were going to do like their real heavy lifts. And not that I've ever used wraps, but that would probably be my recommendation for powerlifters or people who wanted to use wraps. Try and do your main bulk of your work without it, and then just add them in for your real sort of 2 to 3 big sets.
What do you do?
Sorry?
What does a wrap do?
Oh, Hal, are you here?
Oh, Hal, I forgot about you.
Good morning, Hal. I forgot. How could we forget about Big Hal? What did you have a question?
Yeah, what's a wrap? What is it?
A wrap.
Oh, like you're lifting.
Have you seen wrist wraps, knee wraps?
Knee wraps.
Basically, they try to stabilize your joints,
Right.
So you're not getting any incorrect movement of your wrist, for example.
I thought when you said like a belt, I thought you meant like it was extra weight on it.
No, like a
weight belt.
weightlifting belt.
Okay.
So what a weightlifting belt allows you to do is, in powerlifting specifically, is when you push against it, it allows you to create this extra abdominal pressure.
Yeah.
So it stabilizes your core, but allowing you to lift a bit more weight. The problem is a lot of people don't have this initial core strength. They become too reliant on the belt. My preference is to always train with a belt, because if you're using it correctly, then you're going to be engaging your core. But
a lot of it's correct breathing techniques.
Exactly. So a lot of people start off and just don't use a belt correctly, and then they don't build this core strength, and they're just using the belt to kind of rescue them. So
for me, working with a sport like rowing, where like we're just chatting to your boss outside, his daughter's got a sore lower back at the moment. Like it's quite standard in rowing. Like so this area is really important. So that's the main reason we tend not to use the belt with the girls, because I'm like, I really want this to be rock solid, because this has got to stabilise them for thousands and thousands of strokes a week in training, like when they're driving their legs and pulling with their arms, and the core is the sort of connector between the two. But I'm not against using belts personally.
Yeah, and it depends on what you're trying to achieve as well. Specifically for powerlifting, if you're going to be lifting with a belt,
you're going to lift in competition with a belt.
Exactly.
Sure, 'cause it's going to give you more numbers.
With I know everyone's different. Everyone's genetics are different. If I'm training in the 1 to 5 rep range, is it still possible to put on muscle? Like I look at someone like Dhiren, who's a power lifter.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
He's got a huge chest, and you're working in very, very low rep ranges. Like, were you able to build that through powerlifting, or was that a result of earlier years of bodybuilding style training?
When I first entered the gym, it was all about bench and biceps. But it comes back to the principle. So if you're still getting sufficient volume and you're getting this mechanical tension, then you're going to be building some muscle.
So like five lots of 5.
Yeah,
so
that's
25. 3 lots of 8 is 24. So that's a way you can increase your intensity but still keep building load. And I would say it does depend a bit on the genetics and but you don't see too many, like most powerlifters. I mean, you get the big heavyweights who might carry a bit of a gut on them, for instance, but they're still pretty stacked. Like if you look at the size of their legs and their arms, you can still get mass. Yeah.
And like obviously when you first start training, you put on mass fairly quickly, and you get a great response up front, and then over time it sort of plateaus off. For an experienced lifter, say a few years into their training, how much muscle mass can they expect? I know it's going to be different for everyone, but how much muscle mass can they expect to put on in, say, a year? Like you hear of all these people, I put on 10 kilos of muscle this year. How much of that was muscle? Like what's a sort of an expected? Yeah,
that's a hard question to answer. I mean, people can do some pretty amazing things. Don't get me wrong. You often see just going back to a young player, but young rugby league player, like they play one season and then start the next season, and suddenly like
jacked
5 months later, and you're like, what happened to him? Something. But like by sort of prioritising it in your training, maybe doing a little bit less aerobic work, getting really good nutrition on board, and like the overall amount of calories we're getting on board is really important. You can get some pretty amazing gains. Now, obviously, as you get older and more trained, that becomes more challenging. But people can do it. It's pretty amazing. And even I've been blown away with some of the athletes I've worked with. We, like I said earlier, 16 sessions a week, like probably 11 aerobic sessions a week. That really should put a pretty big dent in your ability to gain muscle mass. But they still do it. Like it wouldn't be 10, 15 kilos, but you might get 2 or 3 kilos on in a year, 4 kilos in a year, which I still think is pretty good for a female athlete group doing that amount of volume of training.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. Yeah.
And that's probably my next question, leads into my next question, is how much does cardiovascular training at either a low or a high intensity affect your body's ability to gain muscle? I know this is probably linked heavily to nutrition and recovery and things like that as well, but is there...
It can have a fairly profound sort of impact, actually. So when we have this whole... the way we adapt to a strength session and the way we adapt to an endurance session are two completely different ways. And basically, endurance training blunts your ability to adapt to a strength session. So if we've got, say, someone who's just in the gym, who's probably going there, wants to put on muscle mass, but just wants to stay healthy and fit as well, that's where we probably need to sort of plan your training sensibly. So separating those aerobic sessions from your strength sessions. If you wanted to do them on the same day, I would suggest sort of having up to 6 hours between, so it might be a run before work and then do your main weight session after work and then getting some good nutrition on, and then you can recover through the night. But yeah, it can have pretty profound effects, so it's really quite tough for these endurance, and I guess endurance athletes genetically are a bit different as well, right?
Yeah.
They're good at those events because they've got large amount of slow twitch fibres, which tend to be harder to get mass gains on. So I think that would be one recommendation I would have for people who are specifically trying to gain mass, but still trying to do all different kinds of training in their training program. I would say maybe just drag back your aerobic volume a little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you do much aerobic work?
I've been doing a bit of sprint training recently. Yeah. So I guess that's my reference. It kind of builds that cardiovascular fitness a bit without these long steady state cardio
being too high and everything else. Yeah.
How long are your sprint sessions?
Not too long. Like the sprints itself, probably 200s, 250s, 225s. That's about it. Yeah, we're gonna have a race, Hal. Don't worry.
I'll race you. Dhiren fancies himself as a bit of a speedster, so.
You don't run, you just waddle.
These legs are made for running, not waddling. You got any questions, Hal? As someone, a 12-year-old that's just got into lifting.
13, thank you. I had a question about when you're talking about 10 by 10s. Do you stick to 1 minute between reps?
Good question.
Yeah.
Because I usually aim for 2 to 3. If I'm going 6 to 12 reps, I aim for 2 to 3 minutes rest.
Rest between sets.
Rest between sets. So that's specifically for that German volume training that you would use 1 minute, or you can manipulate how you want, but the recommendation is 1 minute. I think this is interesting. I actually read up on this the other day because I was a bit like, I don't know what the recommendations are now, because bodybuilders would often use 30 to 60 seconds between sets, and the idea is that you build up that metabolic stress. But the counter to that is that obviously because you're not recovering properly, your mechanical load goes down because you can't lift the same amount. So I think probably 1 to 2 minutes, 1 to 2.5 minutes, which is actually longer than I would have thought. Most of the time I'd have always used 1 minute. So big compound lifts like squats, pull-ups, bench, I would give longer recovery because it's just more stressful. So that'd be 2 minutes.
Sometimes 30. I rest 5 minutes plus, between heavy
for big lifts you would. But then maybe your isolation work, your single arm work, your sort of single joint stuff, maybe you can bring that down to 30 to 60 seconds there. So that would be my answer to that. Longer breaks for big movements and shorter breaks for single joint movements.
How long is objectively too long? Like 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
How long do you have to train?
I think this is where you've got to look at the principles
Hal
we're
wants
talking
to know
about.
because he likes to walk around the gym and chat up all the young girls in the gym.
So by having a longer break, you're reducing your metabolic stress. So that's one of your stimuli that you're trying to promote to get that adaptation. So I would say for hypertrophy, no more than probably 3 minutes. But for maximal strength work, you're not really worried about the metabolic stress. So you want to be completely recovered for your next set. So you would have up 5 minutes, maybe even longer between sets there.
So
what are you doing in between sets? For you, what are you doing in those 5 minutes? I get so bored. Like for me, I'm about a minute and probably a little bit longer on the heavy lifts. But what are you doing? Are you stretching? Is that recommended?
No, just pacing up and down and
look like a crazy person.
No, it's actually quite intense when you lift heavy. So you actually panting and actually recovering, and when you feel ready after this 5 minutes or so, then you're ready to hit it. Put some music on, and everybody has their own thing that they do. But I just
Hal likes the shadow box in between sets.
Yeah,
and he goes like that.
Yeah.
Should people be stretching prior to workouts, or there's so much debate about this, and I don't know the answer to this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the advice at the moment is like some dynamic kind of mobility kind of exercise is the way sort of people are recommending. I mean, I don't think it's going to do you, especially like actually if your mobility is a problem to get in position. So say you can't get into a deep squat without doing some static stretching and stuff like that. Well, it makes sense to me that you would do that to improve your technique and help get you into better positions. If you move really well anyway and you can get into position, the recommendation is really some dynamic mobility work. So things like body weight squats, lunges, leg swings, lateral lunges, and so and then I'd always, part of my warm up, we'd have a dynamic mobility component, then some activation component. So some exercises where maybe trying to switch the glutes on or our scap stabilizers.
Do you recommend activation sort of warm ups for every strength and conditioning workout?
I would, yeah. I think it helps. And then the other thing with a warm up is that just mentally getting yourself into the right position. So. Yeah. We're going to train now, so.
A lot of people sort of just warming up that muscle group that they might be training, but I know for you were talking about it recently, the opposing muscle groups. Like on a bench, for example, you're activating your traps and your rhomboids and all that sort of stuff. A lot of people don't think about that sort of thing.
Yeah, so, focusing on these dynamic warm-ups, like I was specifically saying that I do kettlebell swings before benching to, open up this whole scapular region. And I think it's quite... it's quite important, what you warm up on. And also the other side of that is you don't want to warm up too much. You only have a certain amount of energy. You want to save it for your actual warm up. So just do whatever's sufficient to get you into this mobility, get your your heart rate up, get your your mind right, get your muscles activated and things. So.
My warm up has become longer than my actual workout these days. I'm getting that old.
Yeah. Well, I do yoga every morning as well, so it kind of puts me into a nice little.
Makes you feel bad, doesn't it?
Yeah, he does. Everything.
Ross, one of my favourite clips from the old NBA highlights is Greg Popovich in the one of the All-Star games. He's talking to Tim Duncan when he's getting a bit older. In the second quarter, he's like, I'm going to put you in the fourth. You better start warming up.
It's one of the things, like, I'm not a huge American football fan, but it's one of the things that people talk about Tom Brady, right? That he's just been meticulous throughout his whole career with his preparation and doing the little things really well. So just looking after his body.
Yeah, all those things become super important. You don't think about it when you're young. I never used to, and I wish I did. Would have saved myself a lot of injuries and whatnot, but I think a good warm up's super important.
Yeah, for sure.
I think we've covered all the major questions. Did we have any listener questions?
We do have a few. The first one's from Pat Graham. He says, "What sport will help you build the most muscle if you don't plan on exercising outside of that sport?"
So, building muscle without exercising outside of the sport.
So, I guess we'll come back to load. I think that'd be the main thing. How can you do a sport that's going to give you enough load, strength load to produce muscle mass? So I would guess things like combat sports where you're actually pulling and pushing, moving people around, and contact sports. So like rugby, people will get stronger by doing rugby for sure.
Yeah, moving bodies around is effectively moving weight.
That's right. Gymnastics, I guess, is another good one. Like where people are moving their own body weight.
That would be my number one. Gymnastics. You look at those guys. They've probably never been in a weights room or minimal time in a weights room, and they're all pretty jacked. Yeah. They're all pretty big.
And that would be a recommendation for me, sort of young children to get in and do some gymnastics at an early age and working on those balance and moving their body weight and body awareness and all those things.
It's funny. I say the exact same thing to everyone. Gymnastics should be your starting point for any kids looking to get into sport. That should be sort of the first. They can do their sport along with gymnastics. Yeah. But I've seen it in my house. My daughter does gymnastics.
Yeah, you brought her in. She's doing cartwheels all around the office. Yeah,
he's doing everything. And my son doesn't. And my daughter actually carries a lot more. I hope my son doesn't listen to this one day, but my daughter carries so much more muscle than my son. My son's sort of a skinny little thing. You might be going through a bit of a growth spurt, but my daughter's like this little ball of muscle. Yeah. And I attribute it all to gymnastics from the age of 2 onwards.
Yeah.
gymnastics is awesome. Builds a great foundation.
Does a great push up and
she's
holding
so
position
strong.
perfectly. Yeah. So
super strong.
I think that's an advantage when they're light. Start moving your moving your body weight when you're light, and so as you get bigger, you just move with it, right?
Yeah, that's it.
So I think the answer to the question is really just find activities or sports that are loaded. Rock climbing probably be a good one. You know,
It'd be the hardest sport in the world. Any other listener questions, Hal?
Yeah. Stacey Apamata says, how often should I change up my workout? I think we touched on this briefly earlier.
Yeah. I think we covered it, but focusing on the principles, I guess.
Yeah. So I think two things really. One, if you sort of just committed to gains, like you don't change your workout that much until you've stopped improving. But I mean, I understand that people are going to the gym and they want things to be interesting and fun, and like obviously varying exercises is one way to change that up. So most of my programs, depending on the way the season's put together and what the coach is doing for the rowers on the water, I would probably 4 to 5 week blocks and then be looking to
keeps it fresh as well. The mental aspect of going any longer than that, doing the same thing week in, week out. It's your body might still be sort of making gains, but mentally you're just fried. You're just like, I'm just so sick of doing the same stuff.
So maybe you keep your key exercises the same and you play around with your supplementary exercises. Yeah. So I think that's a good way of working that can tick both boxes.
That's pretty much how I approach it as well. You know, always keep squats and deadlifts and bench up in there, but what I do at the end of it, always experiment.
Well, that's your sport, isn't it?
Yeah.
So.
Any other list of questions, or is that it?
Last one from Nabil Mohammed says, how many meals per day should I be eating to gain muscle? That's all I got. I don't know
So
who's the expert on that one?
I guess there's many different approaches that bodybuilders have taken over the years. I was just watching something with Ronnie Coleman yesterday, and he was saying, at his peak, he used to eat 6 massive meals a day, wake up in the middle of the night to eat, and but on the other side of that, you do see people that gain significant amounts of muscle with only eating standard 3 meals or even 2 meals per day. So it comes back to ensuring your if you remember our pyramid of nutrition, which we talked about in the past, the base of the pyramid is always your macronutrient balance. You have to, your energy balance. So you have to make sure you have sufficient calories in your diet to build some mass. Next up is, your macronutrients, making sure you get enough protein, carbs, fat, then your micronutrients. And then, things like frequency and timing at the tip of the pyramid. So
I don't know if you touched on that with Sal on the last podcast, but I think it's become sort of with athletes the more regular eating is what's pushed timing of nutrition around training sessions.
Yeah.
And I guess we haven't really spoken about it much, and probably not my direct area of expertise, but these guys, they need to if you want to put on muscle mass, you need to be eating more. You've got to create a positive energy balance to be able to do that. And it's very hard. It's possible, but it's very hard to sort of put on mass while losing mass, if you know what I mean. It's hard to put on muscle.
You expect to put on a bit of fat.
Mass. So unless you're a real novice sort of thing, or particularly overweight.
Or if you have quite a high amount of protein, it is possible to, do that. But, the most efficient way is to make sure you're getting sufficient calories.
A little bit of extra additional calories, not too much, so that you're actually putting on too much body fat, depending on what your sport and your goal is, I guess.
You want the dirty bulk.
But anywhere between 3 and 6 meals a day would probably be a broad answer on that one.
Good stuff. That's all I've got for you.
Sports topics. Yeah. We're getting back to sports. I feel like things are getting
got my Premier League jersey on.
When does Premier League kick off?
It starts this week.
Yeah.
So excited.
Thursday morning.
Our boy Matty Ryan has just flown back over to the UK to prepare.
Yeah.
Get ready for the first game.
Yeah, Brighton's in the thick of it. It's going to be really fun into the season. But
NRL's back. AFL is back.
Yeah.
The UFC never stopped.
Yeah, Rob Whittaker,
Well, Rob Whittaker just announced his next fight.
Yeah, on Fight Island in Dubai.
Is that where it is? Abu Dhabi?
Abu Dhabi.
Yeah. Fight Island, yeah.
Crazy.
I know. He's fighting Darren Till from the UK.
Yeah.
It'd be a good fight.
Huge
both
fight,
good guys, both similar styles, very aggressive.
Comes back to the old England versus Aussie rivalry,
I know.
So it's going to be pretty good.
It'd be a fun one. They've had some funny banter on social media, so we're looking forward to that fight for sure. Yeah. Shout out to Rob. He's got this one.
Well, so excited to see Rob back in action.
Well, I'm English and Australian, so I'll take the winner.
What's going on in sports, Hal?
Well, that was my first announcement. It was Rob Whittaker versus Darren Till, but I think we're all excited to hear that. Where did he announce it? He announced it on our Twitch, didn't he?
Yeah, on we play. For those that missed it, check out Rob Whittaker's Twitch channel or Musashi's Twitch channel. We, myself and Rob, had a bit of a battle on the UFC 3 game on PlayStation the other day, and at the end of the Twitch feed, he dropped that when he's fighting. I think it was common knowledge anyway, but it was officially announced.
Lovely. Other than that, first topic I guess we'll touch on is the first AFL game back was described as a bit of a flop, 36-all.
36. Well, who was that? I didn't even see that. There's been that much sport I've been trying to catch up on.
I didn't actually catch it either. I think it was Richmond and Collingwood.
Richmond and Collingwood, 36-all.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a flop. Sports back is good, and so many people so many things to adapt to. Playing in front of no crowd, playing in all these new coronavirus restrictions and things.
They've got a crowd that's the cardboard cutouts.
Yeah.
Did you pay to have your cardboard cutout there?
Nah, but might pay to put hell there, but because usually he'd block some views behind him.
I think it's going to take a few weeks for these guys to get back in the swing of things, so we can't be too hard on them. Just had a couple of months off with limited training and connection with their teammates. It's going to take a while for them to gel again and get the flow of the game back. So I think they get a pass at this point. It's just good to see sport back.
Yeah, and I guess the next topic is the NRL, who are a couple of weeks ahead of the AFL. So it's been really interesting and super unpredictable.
Yeah.
It's just people adapting to this new way of life, and I'm a Warriors fan, so Warriors are doing pretty well. Better than people thought they'd come back to do. So
the Melbourne Storm had a win on the weekend, and they had a bit of a bad welcome back to the game as well. They didn't really.
Yeah, they lost their first game back, but since then they've been looking pretty unstoppable. Ambassador Cameron Munster has been turning it up, so
killing it.
Yeah,
it's good to have sports back, but it has been hard with the footy tips. It's hard to predict.
Yeah.
How are you going with your footy tips? You're leading?
Yeah, well, my strategy of always picking the Warriors is, helping me. But
mate, you're an Australian.
That's a bad strategy.
What else is happening, Hal?
My last topic is ScoMo has announced that stadiums with 40,000 capacity and less will be reopening for crowds to watch the footy.
When? I'm there.
I wasn't sure, but soon.
Soon.
I think August, which is the same time they're planning on opening up clubs and scrapping the 50-person club capacity.
Oh, what are you going to do? You're going to head straight to the club, or are you going to go to a game?
Oh, club.
Club? What's wrong with you?
22.
A game, then the club.
But yeah, no, pretty exciting. Actually, my friends in New Zealand sent a few snaps in the weekend, and obviously New Zealand has no restrictions now, and it was a full stadium for the rugby. It was pretty crazy to see.
I think the players will be welcoming crowds back. I think it adds that extra layer of motivation, atmosphere, and it just without the crowds,
I actually quite like the fake crowd in the NRL. Like, I don't know.
We debated this the other day.
Yeah.
The fake crowd is so ridiculous.
It's so good. I don't know how they make it. Like, it just changes with the momentum.
You hear this
of the game.
cheering, and then the camera's panning, and there's just no one there. It just doesn't equate in my head. I know why they do it.
Yeah, but I don't know. I love
it. What's your sport of choice? Pretty built yourself. You look like you've been training for a long time. So.
Not so much recently. No, my sports were football, soccer, and I stopped playing that about 5 years ago, and cricket, which I would be playing now, but I'm working on Saturdays at the moment, so it's making it a bit difficult. But so they're my two sports.
And you get in the gym a bit. Are you sick of the gym? Actually training everyone? Do you still find time for yourself?
I would say my training goes through phases.
Yeah,
it's been very good, and then not so good. So the start of lockdown, I took a few things from the gym and I was training pretty well, and as the period went on, I started running more and more and doing less and less weights. But I'm looking forward to getting back in the gym next week, hopefully. And
I think just physically going to a gym and not working out at home, that's what I've kind of taken for granted. As I've been working out hard, but just physically being somewhere else makes a difference.
Yeah.
I suppose you train at home most.
I train at home, but I've been doing it for years and years now. But initially, that was hard. It's almost like the trip to the gym, being at a different place. It sort of sets your mood and being at home, you're still in that home mood. So you're sort of still slouching around,
Yeah.
I'm still answering my kids' questions while I'm trying to train, and the missus is banging on the floor, stop banging weights and things like that. But eventually you get used to it.
I think you've got to be pretty motivated and hold yourself to account, really, don't you? So
Yeah, that's it. Have we got a famous athlete
We do.
quote? We're hopeless at it, so I'm relying on you to get this today.
This is a favourite athlete of mine, and he says, "Success isn't owned; it's leased, and the rent is due every day."
That sounds cheesy.
I've definitely heard this before.
What is it? Success isn't...
Success isn't owned; it's leased.
Yep.
And the rent is due every day.
Success isn't owned, it's leased, and the rent is due every day. I'm going to go LeBron James.
Baby.
I knew it. I just knew it.
I knew it to be a hardworking athlete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one.
Well, Conor McGregor was talking late last year about how LeBron James, his investment in nutrition really inspired him to build on his own health. Because LeBron James, I think, invests millions of dollars in his personal nutrition every year, and that's why he's 35 years old and having the best year of his career.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Nutrition and
It's a huge
work
life
ethic.
work.
And hey, that's something else. I know we've sort of covered off all the other topics. Recovery. Recently, like ice baths and saunas and things like that are becoming more and more popular. Do any of your athletes use any of those recovery techniques, or they're good?
Well, not at the moment. We don't have either available to them in the centre. But like I would come back to the key things for me for recovery, which is food, sleep,
Sleep.
Yeah.
rest.
Yeah.
Which I've always had a bit of a frustration with the ice bath thing, because I think people, we jump in the ice bath, that's my recovery done, really,
Yeah.
and that's that's quite low down the lists of key things for me.
Yeah.
There's a bit of conjecture about ice baths because the whole idea with the ice bath is that you can recover quickly to be able to put out another performance. So in competition, probably really useful, especially sort of someone like a sport, like say hockey or World Championships, and they play pretty much every day, or for sure you'd be getting them in the ice bath, allowing them to be. But from a training perspective and being able to adapt, but part of the process of adaptation is you going into a bit of a
stress,
a deficit,
Yeah.
and then you adapt to that. So by jumping into an ice bath, the thoughts are that you reduce the actual stress that's been placed on the body, and then you don't get the same adaptation. So I think it needs to be used wisely, and when you utilise it needs to be planned out and thought through about if you do want to use it within a week, what sessions do you use it after, what sessions don't you use it after.
And we've touched on that in the past with Matty Ryan. He's also saying he jumps into a bit of an ice bath as well sometimes after games, and using it strategically is quite important, but you definitely don't want to blunt that training stress.
I think a few of the professional athletes that do multiple sessions a day can benefit from it. But you do, like if you're just the average guy that goes to the gym, you want that stress.
Yeah, you want that.
It's called homeostasis adaptation. Yeah.
You talk about it quite a bit.
Yeah, it's the most important thing. But now, onto our final quote of the day, our Miyamoto Musashi quote. So, we always end with this philosophical quote from the greatest samurai of all time. And
Confuse me again, Dhiren.
We
Go.
try to apply it to what we talked about today. So, the quote today is, "The path that leads to truth is littered with the bodies of the ignorant." I think it's pretty applicable. Plenty of guys jump in the gym, train to failure every day, and figure out pretty quickly that that's not the way to the top.
I think that's good. Can I actually just say something about failure? I just
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's necessarily a wrong thing to do. Yeah. And especially if you're using low loads, we should be training to failure. But my recommendation would be not to train to failure every set, every exercise, all the time. So sometimes when my athletes are in hypertrophy phase, we will train to failure, but only on the last set. So if we do 4 sets of 8 or whatever, it'll be the last set. We're like, okay, if you can push out to 10 or to 11 or whatever, we'll do that, but we won't be doing it every set, and we'll probably only do it for a couple of exercises in a session. If you did want to do it regularly for every exercise, that's where I definitely think you need to have a light week somewhere along the process, or you don't do it for extended periods of time.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good quote, Dhiren.
Yeah.
I got nothing to add on that quote.
Nothing to add on it?
Not
No.
really. I think you covered it pretty quickly.
Well, plenty of people do training and conditioning the wrong way, but it's about understanding the principles and experimenting on what works for yourself.
It's a learning process. I think we all do it the wrong way in the beginning, and that's the way you do learn, by making all the mistakes. But hopefully we helped bypass a lot of mistakes today, and your training is effective. I want to thank David from New South Wales Institute of Sport for coming in.
Thanks so much.
Always great to have
This is enjoyable.
professionals like you, experts in this area, rather than us two just coming in here with our bro science. It's good to get real science. So I want to thank you for coming in. Hopefully you'll be able to come in again in the future.
Sure. Yeah.
We can talk about a different topic, maybe something strength or power related or sport specific, maybe
sure.
rowing.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's been our pleasure.
Yeah.
Anyone that wants to submit a listener question, you can do so podcast@musashi.com, or you can DM us on Instagram, Facebook, anywhere there. Anyone that leaves a review will get a free t-shirt. We'll send that out to you. And also, if you want to listen to the audio version, head over to Apple iTunes or Spotify or any other audio streaming service. Anything else to close off on? Hal, you got any wise words for us to finish on? Okay, we're out. Until next time.
Thanks.
We'll see you again. Thank
Musashi
you.
out.